Hey, hi, how you going? It's your mate Valstride, and today we're going to take a look at an updated list of all the best combat powers for each elemental typing, because the last time I did this list was pre-Tides of Terraria, so a few powers have changed around. Let's take a look. Now, in case you haven't seen the original list, the way I break this down is by ranking each of the top 5 powers in each element in order of their firepower. And the reason I go for firepower is because it's a good indicator of a power's overall strength, given that it calculates the firepower value using attack, HP, and defense. Now, obviously, raw stats aren't the only consideration, but they are at least one of the most objective ways to measure it. However, I will be throwing out some special mentions for powers that fell outside of the top 5, but still have relevance in the meta. But I'll stop yapping and move on to the list. So first up, you can see we have the fire powers, and this typing is actually one of the most interesting in my opinion, because even though the top 5 hasn't shaken up that much, this one has some of the most special mentions for reasons that I'll get into in just a moment. But to run you down the list, you can see that we've still got Yormuntide Ignis and Blazamite Ryu in the number 1 and 2 slots, sharing the highest of all the stats between just the two of them, though notably they do split the attack stat with Bushy Noct and Gangler Ignis, who I've included in these special mentions. However, the only new pal who managed to squeeze its way into the top 5 was Walaska Ignis, which is an interesting one because of its great defensive typing being ice and fire. Now, the reason this is so great is because one of the typings covers the weakness of the other. So in this case, you've got ice, which would normally be weak to fire, but because fire resists fire, it gets neutralized. And this logic applies to Gangler Ignis as well, who is a water fire type. So despite not making top 5 from a stats perspective, I do personally rate Gangler Ignis quite highly. And finally, Finsider Ignis is here as well because this guy has been taking Palworld by storm. His exclusive skill, Trigger Happy, has incredibly high single target DPS. So for that reason alone, he gets to make the list. And remember, if you enjoy this content, like, comment, and subscribe. It all really helps support the channel a lot. But moving along, we've got the neutral pals next, and in order we have Palladius, Selene, Celestia, Fenglope, and King Paka. Unfortunately, no new pals made it into the top 5 for this one, which is led by Palladius with the best in slot stats across the board. But I do want to shout out Herbal here because this adorable little guy has a fantastic partner skill that is going to resurrect the player if they die, so long as Herbal is in party. This obviously makes him a very useful combat pal, but he is going to be the only pal I talk about today whose entry onto this list is due to its utility in combat, not its actual fighting prowess. And the reason for that is I just like this pal and I didn't want this little guy to go unmentioned. Other pals of this nature which could go on the list but I'm not going to talk too much about are things like Gobfin, who you've all heard plenty about already, so I don't need to talk any more on that topic. And lastly, I've got Lavander in here because of its Lifesteal partner skill, which makes it incredibly tanky, given that it's essentially a free vampiric passive for both the pal and the player. Next up, we've got all of the strongest water pals, and this is the one that I'm most excited about because it was the most impacted by the introduction of Tides of Terraria. Now, this was kind of to be expected because we knew that Tides of Terraria was going to be a water-themed update, so it made sense we were going to get some really strong water pals, but man, did they deliver on that expectation. So in order, the list is Neptilius, Yormuntide, Suzaku Aqua, Walaska, and then Gangler Ignis again. So Gangler Ignis does actually make it into the top 5 here, where it was only a special mention when it was on the fire list. But most notably, we've got our newest legendary pal Neptilius all the way up in the number 1 spot with the highest stats in every category except for HP, which is edged out by Yormuntide. But not only does Neptilius boast the best stats in this category, his exclusive move Thalassonic Laser is another insanely powerful attack. So between Neptilius and Finsider, Pocket Pair have delivered some amazing exclusive moves and high DPS water pals. The other two I wanted to highlight in this typing were the special mentions Penking Lux and Turtical Terror. Penking is here because I'm really interested in its dual typing, which is water and electric. So again, this is cool because water normally would be weak to electric, but it's also really interesting because of the interaction between the soaked status effect and electric moves. So when pals are soaked, electric moves are going to do more damage. Now, it might be hard to balance this out correctly, but I suspect there will be some really powerful ways to utilize these aggregate effects. And then lastly, Turtical Terror is really interesting because it's another booster pal which is going to increase the attack stat for your ground pals. And I'm really interested in it because of its applications in the arena, where it could potentially support a Noclum, or you could try stacking up 3 Tentacles to all boost themselves and one another. Moving along to the ground typing, this one didn't change up a whole lot either, but we did get Baloha move up into the 3rd spot, which kicked Gildane off of the list, who was our previous number 5. So sorry Gildane, but you're gone, not good enough anymore. I am interested in Baloha though, because its stats are at least competitive, and it does have a really good exclusive move called Deep Breath. At number 1 in this typing though, we've got Anubis, but this is a great example of where stats don't tell the entire story, because even though Anubis has mostly better stats than Noclum, I would be hard pressed to call Anubis the stronger combat pal, and this is because of Noclum's partner skill Steel Guardian mode, which is going to boost Noclum's attack and defense by up to 200% when it's activated. So in every combat scenario other than maybe raids, Noclum is likely to be the preferred ground pal. And as our special mentions, I had to include the 2 Mammorus variants simply because they have the highest HP, despite not making the top 5 firepower, and for what it's worth, these chonky guys hold the overall record for HP, not just within this typing. The 5th typing we're going to talk about is Dragon, which is still led by Xenolord, who shares the highest HP with Yormantide Ignis. And then moving further down the list, we've got Jetragon holding the highest attack stat by a decent margin. And then finally, we've got Xenogard holding the highest defense stat. Now, this category is exactly the same as it was pre-Tides of Terraria, and I haven't got any special mentions here, so I'm going to swiftly move on to the Dark typings, which has remained the same as well, but I have added in some special mentions. So all the way at the top, we've got Frostallion Noct, leading the way with firepower and HP, but we do have the overall record for the highest attack stat in this category, which is Bellinor and Bellinor Libero. They share the exact same stats, all the way up at 880 attack, and we've got Shadowbeak with the highest defense here. Now, you can kind of get a sense for how unbalanced the Dark typings really are amongst all of the other pals here, because we've got Xenolord all the way down at number 5, who we just saw was the highest firepower dragon type, and yet amongst the Dark typings, he doesn't even stand a chance, right? So Xenolord is still really powerful, and you know, there's nuance here to be had. Dark typing is weak to Dragon, which is super relevant because the highest endgame content at the moment is Dragon typing in, you know, fighting the Xenolord raid. So there's that to consider, but overall the stat discrepancy is massive when you're looking at the Dark pals compared to everything else. Next up, we've got the Grass typing, and this is another one that was actually shaken up quite a bit by the introduction of Tides of Terraria. Once again, the number 1 spot has been overtaken by a new pal, so this time it's the ever-chill Baloha, who we talked about a little bit earlier when we looked at the ground typings, but we also have Palumba up here making its way onto the list with a decent attack stat. But overall, I still feel like this typing is lagging quite a bit behind the rest of the pack. It does do a good job of pairing with fire damage, because grass attacks are going to give out the Ivy covered status, which makes fire damage do more, and that's particularly important for the Bjorn and Bastagor fight. But in the long run, I still do hope we get some more really powerful grass pals with future updates, and hopefully they come with some really good special attacks as well, so that they can compete with the rest of the meta. But before we move on, I have got Verdash in the special mentions with the highest attack stat amongst all of the grass pals. And Verdash also has a really nice partner skill, which is going to boost the player's movement speed, which is kind of neat. It helps you kite around and dodge attacks a little bit better. But we've got just 2 more to go, and the second to last are all of the electric pals. And again, this is another one that didn't really change a whole lot with the update. We've still got Azumane up here in the top slot with the best stats in every category except for attack, which goes to Orsurk. The only new addition here is the Penking, who we talked about a little bit earlier when we looked at the water pals, and we're really mostly interested in that one for its dual typing. And then last but certainly not least, we've got all of the best ice pals. So all the way up at number 1, we've got Frostallion, who has the highest attack stat, and then behind that we've got Bastagor, who actually doesn't lead the way in any of the categories, but we'll talk more on this in just a moment. And then behind that we've got Reptira Chris with the highest defense, and then we've got the 2 Walaskas. Now, this is a weird one, because even though Frostallion has better stats than Bastagor, I still think I'd actually give the edge to Bastagor for a couple of reasons. So firstly, Bastagor has a smaller hitbox than Frostallion, and in Power World that actually matters a lot, because it means they don't get hit by as much AoE damage, which is especially relevant given that some of the best moves in the game at the moment are high damage AoE attacks like Holy Burst. And this can very often be the difference between winning or losing in raid fights like Xenolord, for example. And then secondly, Bastagor gets an exclusive move called Glacial Impact, which is one of the best for the Xenolord raid, and it's really good for the new arena, so he gets the edge there as well. But we can't depart without talking about my mate Frostplume over in the special mentions, and I love this pal. Its partner skill is going to increase player reload speed by 50% while it's out in combat with you. And I recently did some testing on this pal and found that Frostplume's ability caused the combined pal player DPS to be on par with some of the other top combat pals like Yormantide Ignis, which it actually surpassed by a small margin. Now, notably, this only applied when using certain weapons like the multi-guided missile launcher and the plasma cannon, but it does show that this pal at least has potential. And if you want to go and check out that testing in more detail, I'll leave a link to it in the description down below. But that's it for the deep dive into each of the categories. What you can see on screen now is the summary, which we had up earlier at the beginning of the video. But what I didn't mention then was that the pals with the yellow highlight around them are the best in slot for their stat across all of the typings, not just their own typing. So Palladius, for example, has the highest defense out of any pal. We've got Frostallion leading the way in firepower. The Mammorist have the highest HP stats, and the Bellinors have the highest attack. But that's everything for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you next time. Have a good one.